Hi everyone, Air here, and it has definitely been a good minute since I've been able to hop on the Who Am I podcast. There is so much to unlock and unfold in this episode, and quite frankly, I don't even know where to begin. If you all are active listeners, thank you so much for tuning back in. It has been at least a month since I've been able to release an episode. And that mostly comes from the fact that when Anchor decided to become Spotify, it was just a mess of all of the transferring between the softwares to be able to release your podcast. It actually locked me out. And it wasn't from any doing other than mine was one of the podcasts that just had issues with the RSS or however that back end works. But it definitely gave me some time to focus on other projects, also to kind of share the experiences I've had over the last summer, over the last 90 days, and to also just reconvene of how important the podcast is, not only to me and to be able to voice these ideas, this experience of uncovering who am I and discovering new aspects, but also to hear from you all of, hey, Air, what's up? Where'd you go? And being able to engage with you all on social media or via email or even through the Spotify comments. So go ahead and if you have any questions from previous episodes, feel free to comment on those episodes. I've actively started engaging and having those as an opportunity to be able to give a platform and a voice back to you all, which is the whole point, is to be able to help grow the community, to be able to share new ideas, new concepts, new ways of life and perspectives. That was a bit of an opening. So today I'm actually going to cover a lot about emotions and controlling your emotions, what it means to control your emotions, emotional maturity, and how age has really nothing to do about it, but also sharing something that has been really affecting me throughout the last 100+ days. Uncovering truths and just self-discovery and awakening pieces of me that I thought were dormant or even retired for the rest of my life. As you guys know, I'm really big into both the psychotherapy as well as the holistic spiritual approach to healing and self-discovery, personal growth. So when I talk about things like emotions, my Western side gets activated just as much as my spiritual side. And in full transparency, through the events that I'm going to share throughout this episode, I've been working with both my own personal therapist as well as a shaman in collaboration. And that is not always the typical approach to healing and personal growth. But through the course of the events that have happened to me in the last 3 months, I am somebody that very much was like, okay, I can't do it alone. I obviously study psychotherapy. I work with my clients. I try to learn as much psychology and just therapeutic care on that side. But I personally know my connection to God, my connection to my beliefs, to the universe, to my energy. And I had felt for a minute there that I had just lost that spark, that magnetic pull, that synergy with the world. And I'm thankful to be able to hop back on today, 100+ days later, and actually be like, hey, through this experience, I feel like I'm more magnetic than ever. I think I'm more understanding of myself and my capabilities, and even the self-doubt or concerns I had as an individual have been dramatically reduced. And oftentimes when we go through what we deem as negative experiences, that's when our strengths come out. So I actually, and this is just a quick tidbit, was on my way to my favorite coffee shop here in Brickell, and they actually have my books available for sale in the coffee shop, particularly the one called Her Wounded Masculine, which is my poetry book. And this morning, as I was going, I like to actually personally sign these copies and give them to the coffee shop because I'm already going to be there rather than having them shipped there. And occasionally, I like to just scroll through my own words and see what pops out at me or what calls to my focus. And the line that I heard today, or the poem that I read, that probably I wrote maybe like 6 years ago, really stood out to me. And I think it's going to be meaningful for this conversation. I am paraphrasing my own self, but the poem goes, my favorite information, my favorite concept, my favorite knowledge that I've gained. Again, I'm paraphrasing myself. Is the fact that my fears do not know my strengths. My fears have never met my strengths. So when I wrote that originally 6 years ago, I was actually writing it in regards to my complex trauma through trafficking and through abuse and through assault, and learning the type of strength it requires to be able to overcome such impossible circumstances and to reform, or even for the first time, my identity, my strengths. And a lot of people can't go down that deep to the level of identification or self-awareness. If you're on the podcast with me right now, clearly you're one of those people that very much likes to do self-reflection and self-growth and explore your identity. But it takes a lot. It takes a lot to look in the mirror. It takes a lot to sit down with your demons and ask them why they're here, and to be able to actually release them. It's painful. It causes anger. It causes a lot of emotional uproar and inner turmoil. But when we're experiencing what we call these negative events or experiences, it draws out. So I am thankful that I know that my superpower is my strengths, my fears they've never met. How would they at the end of the day? As I tell you this story and as I go through understanding emotions and the impact and the power of choice, accountability, vulnerability, I want to just really hit home on the fact that no matter where you're at in your emotional journey through an experience that's really triggering for you, is that you are capable, just as I am capable. And if that means building your support network or building your team to kind of come around you and wrap their arms around you and enforce your foundation, then that is a strength in itself. Humans, and this is more of a Alfred Adler concept from psychology, is we're not meant to be alone. We're not like other species. Social interests in humans, they can't survive without cooperation. So with that, if you're trying to accumulate superiority over possessions or power or praise or prestige, you're really missing out on your actual true potential of being able to awaken your soul or access the next level of enlightenment or personal growth. Okay, that was my soapbox. For those of you all that follow on social media that have known me for quite a while, I am a businesswoman at heart. And I was actually put into entrepreneurship based off of my trauma and not being able to get a traditional 9 to 5 job in my 20s. And one of the beautiful realizations that I realized in 2023 was that entrepreneurship is indeed a privilege. So I fully embraced that. And when I decided to move back to Miami, kind of took that all together of what was my next step. So if you are engaged with me on Eric Kramer or even Flying with Eric Co on Instagram, then you very well know that I have been taking steps along with a partner of mine to open up a yoga and dance studio in Miami. And we were full, fledge ahead, certifications ready, school ready, a lot of time invested both in a personal practice as well as a teaching practice, as well as just business. If you've ever opened up a business, it's just so much. It is not for the faint of heart. But there was an incident that I will not share the full story just yet on, because it is something that is currently in resolve, where my life got halted and I couldn't move forward on this yoga studio for no fault of my own. I actually did everything according to the book, but God had another plan for me. The universe had another plan for me where suddenly my foundation was being shook. I ended up in a place where my income wasn't matching necessarily my means of living or my ability to provide as normal. And I had to cut back on a lot of expenses. And I did go into a little bit on other episodes that entrepreneurship requires a lot of sacrifice. But in this particular case, it was actually the most sacrifice I've ever had to give for any of my businesses. And it ended up in me letting go of my apartment. I let go of my car. I let go of even Jasper. As you guys know, my little baby Jasper, my golden doodle, he's actually been with a friend for quite some time now because of how this horrible circumstance of really, really, again, I'm not going to go into the story just yet, but just horrible individuals decided to manipulate and lie and use their energy for, quite frankly, for evil. So I am thankful though, because at the end of the day, I'm way stronger than any negative force out there or any evil force out there. Powerful people are not defined by evil. And one of my favorite quotes that I actually learned recently, I would say in the last few days, I think it actually came from, I want to say Newton or Einstein, maybe Tesla, but definitely somewhere in the physics realm of scientist. And it was a little bit religious in a way, but interesting enough, it said that evil can never create anything. So immediately, good is the source of all creation. So as I go forward with my crown on straight, knowing that I have done good and I will continue to do good, I will prevail. And that's just that. That is how it goes. Nonetheless, it had impact but it reminded me how powerful I was. It reminded me that what other people do and say does not define me. And those strengths that you get to have when you're going through painful situations are sometimes where you really get to meet who you are. So I am lucky enough. I have a great support network. I actually moved in with my boyfriend. I I became closer with my mother as a result of this, and I really realized how much good that I've done in the past where people showed up for me in this time of need to provide their expertise, to provide their services, to be able to give their counsel. So, very much a healthy reminder that if you keep doing good and you keep treating people right, the good individuals in your life will show back up for you. I love to reward loyalty and I love to reward faithfulness and just good deeds. And I feel like this was a time in my life where others came around and wrapped their hands, their arms, their talents around me in this case. So I will eventually get into an episode that actually explains everything of the situation that I'm talking about currently, but for now, it is not the day nor the place, and that's okay. What I do want to talk about, though, is the emotional just strength it has taken through this and how I've started to see emotions in a different way. Now, obviously, we identify emotions through our ego. We don't necessarily always assume that they are spiritual elements, but we do kind of connect them to frequencies or vibes, and authenticity being the top of the frequencies or the top of emotions. With that, when we get dragged into the energy of the lower vibration people or the people that are out here trying to do evil or trickery or mischievous acts, that can really bring out some not so fruitful emotions. And if you're starting to have to live in that in almost a war mentality day in and day out as you're surviving, you got to really lower your own frequency and your own vibration. And it will show up not just in how you're reacting to what's around you in the situation, but also on other parts of your lives. So it was not only affecting my work life and my finances, but it was also affecting how I showed up for my clients that I do have. And not that I would ever have negative like outbursts or anything like that while having my clients, but I will admit that it was hard to help them through some of their journeys while I was having such turmoil in my own heart. So holding that space can be hard. It's kind of like the whole fill your own cup before you can fill others. And there was definitely times where I had to be just very authentic and share like, hey, today's not the best day that I can show up for you. Can we please reschedule? Or can we please, convene in, an hour later? That way I can reset my energy and my space. And I have the best clients in the world. I'll just say that off the bat. And they were very loving and very understanding and very intuitive, to be honest, on some of what I meant. But that's where these concepts of understanding emotions and bringing that home really can help as far as, moving forward. So, first thing I want to just kind of get into is emotional choices versus emotional responses. Unfortunately, adulthood requires emotional choices over emotional responses. Emotional responses as a child is actually highly encouraged. We want our children to express themselves when they are in pain, when they're happy, when they're sad, because it's a very healthy thing to do is to express yourself. But as you're an adult and life kind of hits you, you kind of have to suck things up more. You kind of have to restrain yourself, and not even in a angry type of way, but also in an emotional, like painful way. For those of you all that are in long-term relationships or have been married, odds are your partner has hurt you at some point. And trying to have that battle of resentment versus forgiveness becomes difficult. And you almost feel like you're having to regulate emotions to be able to move forward in relationships. So emotional choices become favored as we become adults, versus emotional responses are honestly healthier. So I will say that there's been other instances throughout the categories of my life in the last 100 days that had nothing to do about my career, but did pull out some really tough emotions I had to face at the same time. I almost felt like in late August that I was experiencing every pillar of my categorical life crumbling down and basically saying, you have to rebuild. How are you going to rebuild? Are you willing to walk away? Are you willing to stay? And it was really challenging my default of attachment style of avoidance, because I was 100% ready to hop on a plane and go to Bali, and not for the right reasons. It was more for the escaping reasons, versus Bali is just an amazing place and very healing energy. All in all, reacting to a situation versus taking a moment to respond thoughtfully, and a moment being an hour, a day, a week, was really challenged during this time, because I was learning that those around me, not in partnership necessarily with me, but around me, were not having my best interest at heart. That there was times that they made choices that they knew were either wrong or going to hurt me, and they still made them. And when one category of your life does that, it's easy to handle that. It's easy to be like, hey, this is just business. This doesn't affect me everywhere else. I can go home and it's not going to affect me. Or I can go, out to yoga and it's not going to affect me, or XYZ. But that wasn't the case for all of August and September and even upwards into October. It was, no matter where I went, I had to look betrayal in the eyes. I had to look greed in the eyes. I had to look at these manifestations that were causing me inside to want to fall apart. That were causing me to want to scream. That were causing me to have emotions that, again, of just, I'll be honest, rage. And I hadn't felt rage in a decade. And that's where personal growth comes in. Is the emotional expression versus the emotional choice. My rage was a lower frequency to how I live a magnetic life, or a authentic life, or a loving life. And that is where understanding my emotions and understanding psychotherapy really came into play, was the fact that I'm no longer that person. This is another circumstance. This is another lesson. This is another story in a grand event of stories. And I probably will write this story. If you guys can trust that Air will do anything, she's going to write it down. So with that, it was an opportunity. It's still an opportunity where, now that I've stepped back into my power and I recognize who I am even more, it's like my fears don't know my strengths. I kind of want to get a little bit into like the power of choice for a second here, because what I will be quite frank is some of the techniques I had for processing emotions just did not seem like they were working. So as I'm being authentic on how this experience has been, I gotta be real to both my Western community as well as my spiritual community on just some things that just weren't working. And then tell you what did work. Okay. So I am an avid person when it comes to meditation, taking some headspace. I'm a person that I like to listen to my frequencies. I like to listen to classical music, probably over any other type of music. I'm a journaling person. I love to write and process emotions. I am somebody that loves to do yoga pretty much every single day. And I am the NLP, you name it. There's all these different practices that I do for my mental and emotional health and even physical health. I was in the gym every day. I am in the gym every day. I was really focusing on those outlets, and it just wasn't working. And I don't mean to say that those aren't healthy. I will continue to do each of those things, but the amount of turmoil that this had taken on my mental health, even after doing all of it, I was still discouraged. I was still in pain. I was still angry. I remember even my boyfriend taking me down to the gym, and I was at the point where I was like, I haven't punched anything in a really long time. Like, I hadn't taken a kickboxing class in a really long time, but I went and I personally found my mitts because I needed to just get that out. I needed to purge it out of me. And after probably about 20 minutes on the punch, like on the bag, I took off the gloves and I saw my hands. And my hands felt like a physical representation of what my heart felt like. They were all battered and kind of, they're red, chafing, and then like just honestly, some of my knuckles were actually bleeding. And I wanted to just leap out. Like the little air in me just wanted to leap out and be like, look at what you all did. Like, look at how much this hurts. Pay attention. And honestly, like the people that have done these actions to me are never going to see it that way. They're never going to see how much they actually hurt me. And they probably don't care. And that's fine. That's part of being an adult as well, is to realize that not everybody's your friend. Not everybody cares. And that's just the way it is. But me, Air, spending a moment with little Air and recognizing I do see these quote unquote pilgrims. I do see this pain. I do recognize this. I'm going to take care of you. I'm going to fix it. I'm going to protect you. That is the power of choice. That is the emotional response. That is how you start to move forward. You have to recognize it. You have to recognize that you might be the only one that cares. But when all of these other things failed, or didn't really get the job all the way done, I don't want to say failed because I still love all of these and they still definitely have their own impacts and have helped me significantly throughout my life. But when everything else didn't work, that did. And I'm not referring to the punching of the bag. I'm referring to the self-recognition of taking charge of your little self and holding the space within yourself. Now, I have a spoiler alert. I do have a few books coming out very soon. I've been writing them all simultaneously. And as I was talking at the coffee shop and delivering those books earlier, I kind of shared it with the head barista there. And he was like, how do you even do that? How do you write 3 at a time? I was like, I literally have different books for different parts of my brain. That's how I'm able to achieve that. But I go into one book that is based on the spirituality principles blended with psychotherapy, and it will really help you engage with this little self, but not only your little self, but all of yourselves to be able to identify, recognize those, and bring what I call the our round table method into reality for you. So I'm super excited. If you want to know how to get that book ahead of time or be on the pre-order list, go ahead and comment or DM. I will make sure that you're there because, quite frankly, that's been my favorite book I've ever written. And I've written 7 books. As you guys know, when I publish all of these, I'll get up to 10. But this book gets different because it's not about crime that was committed. It's not about a negative experience, not about even poetry or anything. Like, this is such a personal growth, empowering book that it's like the divine feminine just roared. So I'm ready for that to happen. I'm ready to share that. And it's probably my most proud work so far. And I'm being very authentic. I'm not just, quote unquote, blowing smoke. Like, it's my favorite. So that's that. That's coming. All right. I'm going to bring it back to just the role of accountability and taking charge of that emotional state. Understanding it's a choice sometimes. And understanding that the only person really responsible for recentering you is yourself. And you need to be very self-aware on how you get back there. I recognized that I wasn't able to do the job alone. That's why I went and I got back in touch with a therapist. I got in touch with a shaman. I got in touch with just realizing that no matter what, no matter who, I was going to take care of myself. Whether I was in a relationship or not, whether I had family backing me up or not, whether I had a business partner or not, whether I had a business or not, a home, a dog, a car, and was still going to be okay. And that was my responsibility to go back to myself. A little bit of vulnerability comes in that. Being able to actually accept your emotions, accept you're good, you're bad, you're wrathful, you're angelic. A lot of people, and I think this has to do with just my aesthetic more than anything, do say I have an angelic energy or an angelic presence or that kind of Mother Teresa thing going on. And while that's very sweet and kind, I do feel it can be misleading at times because everyone has darkness. And as light as you are, you have to feed that dark. I don't really try to reflect out light, but that is only possible through me going all the way down into my personal vulnerability of my darkness. I've had a lot of hard times in my past that have allowed me to open myself up to a genuine connection with humanity. Because humans aren't necessarily inherently good. Depending on what religious practice you believe in, you may be able to relate this to like Adam and Eve or to some other type of like historical reference. But the world we live in isn't always forward facing on utopia. It's actually going the opposite. Do we have a lot of starseeds and a lot of light workers and a lot of good people out there? 100%. But at the end of the day, You have to recognize your own light, your own darkness, your own weaknesses, your own strengths. That's how you actually grow. If you're neglecting any of that or avoiding any of that, you're not going to get anywhere. You won't be able to make the emotional choices you want. You won't be able to even hold space for yourself to get through really hard times. So I'm going to wrap this up. I know that there is like so many questions that could be like divulged into the references of what pulled this out of me, the different events that happened over the last, few months. But all in all, my only real message here is to help you understand that emotions can be choices. If you accept them and listen, they don't have to define you. When you can learn not to control your emotions, but to work with your emotions, that is what we call emotional intelligence. That is personal growth. Okay, I get to say something I haven't been able to say in a really, really long time. And I'm so honored every single time I get to say this. And I think the fact that I am able to say it again just shows me how much I love you all and I love this show and I love the podcast. But here we go. As always, thank you for growing and healing with me today.